Today, we explore how this date completely reshaped our world across five powerful dimensions: culture, education, finance, politics, and technology. This day proves that history never rests. Let's dive into the fascinating interconnected events of this date that continue to influence how we live, think, and innovate today. So, without much further ado, let's go.
Imagine a day so chaotic that in one century it triggers a massacre that literally turns a river red, and in another it burns the White House to the ground.
Yeah, there's quite a specific focus.
Right. Because usually a date on a calendar is just a box where you, I don't know, jot down a dental appointment or a reminder to pick up dry cleaning. But today is Monday, August 24th, 2026. And, looking at the massive stack of sources we've got today, it makes you wonder, what if one specific day of the year acts as this, like, historical magnet for paradigm shifts?
It is a really compelling premise, to be
Mm,
honest. We're conditioned to view history as this slow, continuous, predictable flow, gentle river.
yeah.
But when you start cross-referencing dates across different eras, you find these strange temporal focal points. Certain days just seem to attract chaos, creation, and just absolute rupture.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive. We're pulling from a highly diverse collection of materials today. We've got Wikipedia historical archives, university founding records, and even a highly technical financial viewpoint from BlackRock.
It's a broad spectrum.
It really is. And our goal is to uncover the hidden connective tissue of August 24th across centuries. We're going to explore how this single date has been ground zero for cultural ruptures, the birth of nations, massive technological leaps, and some intensely complex financial meltdowns. Okay, let's unpack this. I want to start with how August 24th has historically been a day of shocking, violent rupture. And for that, we're going all the way back to 1572.
We are, yes. We're going to a largely Catholic Paris. And the context leading up to this day is, well, it's absolutely crucial to understanding the explosion of violence that followed. Because this was actually supposed to be a moment of national healing.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, just a few days prior, on August 18th, a royal wedding had taken place. You had the French king's sister Margaret marrying the Protestant King Henry III of Navarre.
So the city is packed, right? You have all these wealthy, prominent Huguenots, the French Calvinist Protestants coming into Paris to celebrate this unifying royal wedding. It's basically engineered to be a bridge between two fiercely divided religious factions that had, been tearing the country apart.
Exactly. But the peace was incredibly fragile. The tension in Paris was palpable. Just days after the wedding, on August 22nd, there was an attempted assassination on Admiral Gaspard de Coligny.
He was a major figure for the Protestants.
Oh, absolutely. He's the most prominent military and political leader of the Huguenots. Now, that assassination attempt failed, but it acted as a match in a powder keg. So on the eve of August 24th, which happens to be the feast of St. Bartholomew, the political elite panicked. King Charles IX, who historical tradition suggests was heavily influenced by his mother, Catherine de' Medici, he preemptively ordered the assassination of the Huguenot leaders.
Including Admiral de Coligny.
Right, including him. The idea was to strike before they could retaliate for the first attempt.
So a royal peace summit essentially devolves into a decapitation strike against a religious minority, which is wild. But it doesn't just stop at the leaders, does it? The state-sanctioned hit list spirals out into the general public.
It completely escapes the control of the crown. It triggers weeks of mob violence. It starts in Paris, but rapidly expands outward into the countryside and other urban centers across France. When you look at the modern estimates, based on the historical records, they suggest anywhere from 5,000 to 30,000 people were killed.
That is just a staggering number of people.
It is. But what's fascinating here is the underlying nature of that violence. It wasn't just, random mob brutality or a generalized riot.
Mm.
According to historian Mac P. Holt, who extensively analyzed the religious motivations of the era, the violence was deeply, specifically ideological.
Okay, let's dig into that.
Hmm.
How does a historian differentiate between a random riot and, like, ideological violence? Were they sending a specific message?
They were actively mimicking religious rites.
Really?
Yeah. Holt points out that the Catholic mobs were acting out their theology. They burned many Protestant houses and their victims, which deliberately invoked the traditional concept of purification by fire. That was the standard punishment for heretics.
Oh, I see. So it wasn't just destruction for destruction's sake.
Exactly. Furthermore, many victims were thrown into the Seine River. Holt argues this was a grim mimicking of purification by water in Catholic baptism.
Wow.
The Huguenots weren't just seen as political rivals. They were perceived as a fundamental threat to the cosmic, social, and political order. Therefore, they had to be systematically eradicated in a way that mirrored religious cleansing.
The broader institutional reaction to this at the time is it's jarring to modern ears. Our sources note that Pope Gregory XIII actually celebrated the massacre.
He did.
He viewed Coligny as a direct threat to Christendom. So the Pope commissioned the artist Giorgio Vasari to paint 3 frescoes in the Vatican to commemorate the killings. He literally placed this event right alongside the defeat of the Turks at the Battle of Lepanto. The level of institutional endorsement for a bloodbath is it's staggering.
It is. It really requires us to step out of our modern ethical frameworks and understand the 16th century. Religion, state power, and violence they were inextricably linked. Both sides of the religious divide during the French Wars of Religion view their survival in absolute existential terms. A threat to the church was a threat to the state, and vice versa.
Yeah, that makes sense in that context. But that 1572 massacre was an internal collapse, a society turning violently on itself over ideology. But a nation's vulnerability isn't always from within. Sometimes the destruction is entirely external, like a foreign threat tearing down your institutions. Which brings us to another August 24th, this time in 1814.
The burning of Washington during the War of 1812. On this specific day, a British force of about 4,500 battle-hardened troops, commanded by Rear Admiral George Cockburn and Major General Robert Ross, marched directly into Washington, D.C.
And they had just routed the American forces at the Battle of Bladensburg, right?
Like leaving the capital completely defenseless.
And they didn't just occupy the city. They went on a highly targeted campaign of arson. They specifically went after the public buildings that symbolize the young American Republic, starting with the United States Capitol.
And the precision of the historical record here is remarkable. They started with the southern wing, which housed the House of Representatives, and then moved to the northern wing, which housed the Senate and the Supreme Court. The superintendent of public buildings later calculated the exact financial loss to the Capitol.
They actually put a dollar amount on it.
They did, exactly, $787,163.28.
Just an incredibly meticulous accounting of total devastation, down to the 28 cents.
Down to the penny, yes. And the mechanics of how they burned the Capitol is heavily detailed in the records, too. The British actually struggled initially to get the heavy stone walls to catch fire because they couldn't scavenge enough wood in the immediate area.
Oh, so what did they do?
Well, they found their fuel in the northern wing, which contained the original Library of Congress. It held about 3,000 volumes. They essentially used the history, the laws, and the accumulated knowledge of the young nation as kindling to burn its capital to the ground.
That is such a visceral image, just burning the books to burn the building.
It's very symbolic.
From the Capitol, they marched straight up Pennsylvania Avenue to the White House. And this brings up a detail from our sources that I found incredibly compelling because it corrects a very famous piece of American historical mythology.
The Dolly Madison story.
Exactly. The standard story is that First Lady Dolly Madison heroically stayed behind to save the famous Lansdowne portrait of George Washington just moments before the British arrived.
Right. It is arguably one of the most repeated stories in early American history.
But the reality is far more complex, thanks to a first-hand eyewitness account. Paul Jennings was a 15-year-old enslaved attendant to President James Madison at the time. Jennings later bought his freedom and wrote what historians consider the first actual memoir of the White House.
And his perspective is vital here.
It changes everything. In his writings, he explicitly clarified that Dolly Madison simply did not have the time or a ladder to take down that giant portrait. According to Jennings, she saved the silver in her reticule, like her small handbag, and fled.
Right.
It was actually the enslaved staff and other workers, including a man named John Seusat and the gardener Thomas McGraw, who physically broke the frame and saved the painting.
It's a crucial historical correction that centers the real people doing the physical labor of saving that history.
Yeah.
Now, the military rationale behind this destruction is also worth noting. The British attacks weren't just random acts of cruelty. They were explicitly ordered as military retaliation.
This is what happened in Canada, right?
Exactly. American forces had previously burned and looted British-held Upper Canada, specifically York, which is modern-day Toronto, and Port Dover.
So it was a brutal tit for tat, but the British didn't get to hold the city for long, did they? Because the occupation ended almost as abruptly as it began.
Nature dramatically intervened. Less than 4 hours after the fires at the Capitol and White House started, a massive, severe thunderstorm rolled in. Meteorologists reviewing historical accounts believe it was likely a hurricane that spawned a tornado.
Talk about timing.
Truly. The torrential rain extinguished the fires and actually forced the British to abandon the city, limiting their occupation to just about 26 hours. Meanwhile, President Madison and his government had scattered. They ultimately regrouped in a small town called Brookville, Maryland, staying in the home of a Quaker silversmith named Caleb Bentley. For one brief moment, that little town became the capital for a day.
So August 24th has this heavy reputation for tearing down old symbols, whether it's through religious purges in Paris or retaliatory military strikes in Washington. But if we shift our focus, we see August 24th is equally powerful as a day where the stroke of a pen creates something entirely new out of absolute chaos.
Yes, moving from the physical destruction of capitals to the forging of new legal and sovereign realities. And the most monumental example in our stack of sources is August 24th, 1991.
The day Ukraine declared its independence. Let's set the stage for this because the tension is palpable. The Soviet Union is in a state of mortal danger. On August 19, just 5 days prior, hardline communists attempted a coup in Moscow against Mikhail Gorbachev.
Right, the August coup.
The central authority of the USSR is fracturing. It's terrifying, and the shockwaves immediately hit the Ukrainian parliament, which is known as the Verkhovna Rada.
The Verkhovna Rada convened an extraordinary session on that Saturday, August 24th. And it wasn't a simple, unified march toward freedom. It was an 11-hour, high-stakes political chess match. The debate was over whether and exactly how to declare independence.
Because the parliament was heavily divided, right?
They're very divided. The nationalist factions wanted an immediate, irrevocable declaration, but the communist majority in the Rada pushed back. They demanded that any declaration had to be confirmed by a popular referendum, arguing that without a direct vote from the citizenry, the move wouldn't represent the true legal will of the people.
So they are walking this massive political tightrope, trying to extract their country from a collapsing superpower without triggering a civil war or a military crackdown.
Exactly.
So after 11 hours of debate, they engineer a compromise. At 17:57, so 3 minutes before 6 in the evening, they hold a preliminary vote. The proposal is essentially, we will vote on the act of declaration of independence right now, but we legally bind ourselves to hold a confirmatory national referendum later on December 1st.
And that procedural compromise passes easily. 321 in favor, 2 against, and 6 abstaining.
Once that preliminary hurdle was cleared, the atmosphere in the chamber shifted entirely. The communist bloc was now legally and politically locked in to support the main act. The records describe the parliament bursting into applause and a standing ovation before the final vote was even cast.
Which is incredible to picture.
It is. Then, at exactly 18:00 hours, they held the official vote on the Act of Declaration of Independence of Ukraine. The result was overwhelming. 346 votes in favor and only a single vote against.
A single dissenting vote.
Let me stop you there and play devil's advocate for a second. We look back at this as a monumental day. But did a single piece of paper really end an empire? The Soviet Union was already bleeding out economically and politically. Was this vote actually the fatal blow or just the final domino falling over?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it was far more than a symbolic piece of paper. The Act of Declaration was a calculated legal and military severing.
Okay, how so?
First, it explicitly claimed the right of a nation to self-determination in accordance with the UN Charter, giving it immediate standing in international law. But more critically, on that exact same day, the parliament didn't just declare sovereignty. They voted to transfer jurisdiction of all Soviet armed forces located on Ukrainian territory over to themselves.
Wait, they seized command of the military apparatus right then and there?
Precisely. They took physical and legal control of the borders and the military, and regarding that confirmatory referendum they promised, when December 1st rolled around, a massive majority of Ukrainians across all regions affirmed the declaration.
Wow.
The very next day, international recognition flooded in from around the globe. This legal extraction by Ukraine on August 24th removed the second most powerful republic from the USSR, triggering the ultimate formal dissolution of the Soviet Union just weeks later on December 26th.
It is the definitive pivot point. Now, staying on the theme of creation, A much smaller but deeply resonant institutional birth also happened on this exact date, a few years earlier. On August 24th, 1974, Concordia University was officially founded in Montreal.
Yes, and the mechanics of its founding share a thematic link with what we've been discussing, bringing disparate factions together. Concordia was formed through the merger of two very distinct educational institutions.
Right.
You had Loyola College, which had deep Jesuit roots tracing all the way back to 1848, and Sir George Williams University, which evolved out of YMCA evening classes starting in 1851.
So you have a traditional, religiously rooted college merging with a school born out of pragmatic, community-based evening classes. And the university's motto captures that fusion perfectly. Concordia Celis, which translates to well-being through harmony.
It's a wonderful contrast.
It really is. When you contrast that with Paris in 1572, where differing ideologies resulted in mass slaughter in the streets, here in 1974, you have a Jesuit philosophy and a YMCA ethos harmoniously merging into a massive secular institution. Today, Concordia hosts nearly 50,000 students. It's a completely different constructive approach to managing institutional differences on the exact same date.
It highlights a broader shift in our historical timeline, too. As we move into the 20th century, August 24th transitions from being a day about drawing or erasing geographic and institutional borders to a day about breaking visual and digital boundaries. The very technology we use to witness history unfolding was essentially named on this date.
Oh, this brings us to the birth of the screen age. We are heading back to Paris, but this time it's August 24th, 1900, at the International Electricity Congress during the World's Fair.
Right. A Russian scientist named Konstantin Persky presented a paper that reviewed the existing electromechanical technologies of the time, specifically tools like the Nipkow disk, which was an early spinning disk image rasterizer used to transmit images. In that presentation, on August 24th, he officially coined the word television.
He just casually drops the word that will entirely define human consumption of information for the next 100 years.
Just like that.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Exactly 95 years later, to the day, August 24th, 1995, that screen age goes fully digital for the masses.
The retail launch of Windows 95.
The cultural hype for this operating system was unlike anything the tech world had ever seen before. Microsoft spent an absolute fortune to make this a global event. They licensed the Rolling Stones song Start Me Up for the commercials.
Oh, I remember that.
Right. They hired Brian Eno, the legendary ambient musician, to compose that famous 6-second startup sound. But underneath all that marketing flash, the actual mechanics of the operating system changed how humans physically interact with computers.
The architectural leap was profound. Windows 95 moved the entire PC ecosystem from a 16-bit cooperative multitasking environment, which is what the older Windows 3.1 used, into a 32-bit preemptive multitasking architecture.
Okay, let's translate that out of computer science speak. Cooperative multitasking is basically like a chaotic one-lane dirt road. The software programs have to politely take turns using the computer's processor.
Right, which rarely goes well.
Exactly. If one program decides to hog the road or if it stalls out, everything behind it stops and the whole computer crashes. Preemptive multitasking is like bulldozing that dirt road and building a multi-lane superhighway complete with a traffic cop, the operating system itself.
That is a perfect analogy.
That traffic cop actively directs the flow, deciding exactly which program gets processor time and for exactly how long. It made the entire system vastly more stable and capable of running multiple things at once.
And by combining that stable superhighway with plug-and-play driver support, long file name support, and introducing the now ubiquitous Start button and taskbar, Windows 95 completely redefined the graphical user interface. It was the digital on-ramp for an entire generation.
But what happens when that interconnected digital superhighway gets flooded and panics? Because August 24th isn't quite done with us yet. Let's jump to August 24, 2015.
The flash crash equivalent.
Yeah.
This brings us to the SEC documents and the BlackRock Viewpoint report regarding the U.S. equity market structure. In late August 2015, global market sentiment turned deeply bearish, largely driven by macroeconomic concerns over global growth and inflation.
So people were nervous.
Very. This anxiety triggered a rapid spike in volatility. The VIX, which operates as the stock market's primary fear gauge, doubled in a matter of days.
The trading volumes just exploded. And as BlackRock outlined in their autopsy of the event, this massive influx of volume exposed some severe hidden flaws in our digital market structure.
This raises an important question about market resiliency. On the morning of August 24th, a confluence of underlying issues impeded the flow of basic order and pricing information. Because the data was lagging, exchanges halted trading and delayed the opening bell for various securities.
And that broke something else, didn't it?
It did. Because of these disruptions, a critical financial mechanism, the arbitrage mechanism for exchange-traded products, or ETPs, was temporarily impaired.
Okay, for the sake of absolute clarity, can we break down what that arbitrage mechanism actually is and why it breaking is such a big deal?
Certainly. Think of arbitrage like this. Imagine you notice a fully assembled television is selling for $500 at store A.
Yeah.
But across the street at store B, you can buy all the exact parts to build that television for $450.
Okay.
You buy the parts, build the TV, walk across the street, and sell it to store A, pocketing a risk-free $50 profit.
Sounds like a good deal.
It is. And by doing this repeatedly, your buying and selling naturally forces the prices at both stores to match up. In the stock market, market makers do this millions of times a second with ETPs and their underlying stocks to keep prices perfectly in sync.
But on August 24th, Store B's doors were locked. The delayed opens and halts meant the market makers couldn't see the price of the underlying parts.
Exactly. Without reliable pricing data, the market makers step back. They stop buying and selling. As a result, the prices of the ETPs violently decoupled from their actual underlying value.
And what is truly wild to me about this BlackRock report is how human psychology poured gasoline on this technological fire. A massive amount of the damage that morning was entirely self-inflicted by everyday investors who just panicked.
Fear took over.
Yeah, people were excessively using market orders and stop-loss orders. They were seeking, as the report calls it, liquidity at any price.
Which is incredibly dangerous.
Yep.
When you demand liquidity at any price during a volatile period where the pricing mechanisms are already failing, you create a vacuum. A stop-loss order automatically triggers a sell when a stock hits a certain low price.
Right.
But because the market makers had stepped back, there were no buyers. Those automated stop-loss orders just fed into a feedback loop of selling pressure, driving prices down to artificially absurd lows in a matter of minutes.
BlackRock's primary takeaway wasn't just that the exchanges needed to fix their automated speed bumps, the limit up, limit down rules that pause trading during wild swings. Their main point was that customer education was desperately needed.
Yes.
Investors have to understand how to properly use order types during high volatility, or they will quite literally burn their own portfolios to the ground.
The technology was functioning based on the inputs it received, but the human inputs were driven by sheer panic.
It is incredible. You look back at this journey. August 24th is a day of literal fire and bloodshed in Paris in 1572 and Washington in 1814. It is a day of incredible new creations, forging sovereign independence in Ukraine in 1991 and educational harmony with Concordia in 1974.
And it's the day that defined our relationship with screens and digital systems through television in 1900, Windows 95, and the market panic of 2015.
It serves as a potent reminder that historical progression is rarely linear. So what does this all mean for you, listening right now? It proves that history isn't just a slow, predictable march. It is punctuated by these sudden, explosive leaps, both constructive and destructive. And they can happen on any given Tuesday, or in this case, a Monday, August 24th.
I think there was one last thread connecting these events that we need to consider, especially when looking at the evolution of our society.
What's that?
Well, on August 24th, 1814, the physical paper records of a young nation were destroyed by actual fire at the Library of Congress. By August 24, 1995, with the launch of Windows 95, we began the massive transition to digitizing our entire life, our knowledge, and our records, theoretically to protect them and make them accessible. But as the market panic of August 24, 2015 showed us, those interconnected digital systems can freeze, panic, and evaporate massive amounts of wealth just as easily as physical buildings can burn. So as we continue to digitize our history, our identities, and our financial structures, have we actually made our society more resilient to the August 24th shocks of the future? Or have we just changed the type of fire that can burn it all down?
Hi viewers, family and friends. How did you like the content of this video? Like the video and subscribe to the channel. Please write in the comments your name and the place you are watching from. Since our viewing family is spread all over the world, it will be nice to know which city and the country you are watching from, so I can say hello to you. Science and technology. Reading and listening to the historical accomplishments on this date of those who have gone before us, I, as a professional engineer with interest in structural engineering, energy-efficient buildings, ICF construction, and as Google Docs expert with interest in spreadsheet-based solutions, draw inspiration to ask of myself the million-dollar question. What would I accomplish today? Think about the Japanese practice of Kaizen. Let me know in the comments, what would you accomplish today? Your subscribing to the channel inspires me to post more such videos. Thanks for your patronage. See you in the next video. Sincerely, Yogi Anand.